Hi there. Welcome to the DFS Build. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith. We're going to go over the 6-game slate for DraftKings on Thursday, February 29th. It's a repeat of yesterday. Yesterday was a 6-game slate too, correct?
Sounds accurate.
Okay. All right. Well, there is actually a lot to go over here. It should be a fun slate. Keyword should. Before we get going here, let you know this video is sponsored by DFS Hero. Really nice lineup optimizer that you can use to score a takedown. You can actually get 15% off when you use our link, which is in the video description below. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it, Taylor. The Bucks and Hornets are the first game of the night. Yeah, I know. The Hornets are 11.5-point dogs at home. The game is a 217.5 total, which obviously has to do with Milwaukee playing a little bit better defensively lately. Also, the Hornets are not good. And without LaMelo Ball, the Hornets do not push the pace as fast as they normally do. So this is a problematic game, but starting on the Bucks side, who stands out for you?
Well, I mean, Giannis by default, I guess, because he's Giannis. And, we don't have Luka out there tonight. No Jokic either on this slate. So I suppose he stands out by default. Of course, this game could easily get out of hand. I think Charlotte had 26 points in the first half the other night, which is quite abysmal. Bobby Portis, I think, is viable in tournaments again. He feasted the other night predictably. Shouldn't garner much attention, I wouldn't think. Milwaukee pretty healthy at this point. So he and Lopez look okay. They're both under 6. I don't mind that. Dame, I guess, kind of like the other night, you can make a case for, still under 9K, but come back up a little bit. I think he was 86 on Tuesday night. So honestly, not too much stands out, even though they do have a good matchup and all that.
Yeah, it's probably Giannis or bust for me. I think it's a worrisome spot, not only because of blowout, but I think blowout risk has contributed to it a lot in the previous 3 meetings this year, where he's only averaged 39 fantasy points per game. But if you extrapolate that out to, like, if he plays 35 minutes, you're looking probably at a 54 fantasy point floor with Giannis, and obviously he has more upside than anybody else on the slate has to offer. So I'm interested to see what ownership looks like right before lock, because if he is going to be around 10% owned or lower, that's very, very interesting to me on a 6-game slate. There's SGA and maybe Wemby, I guess, but there's nobody who has the ceiling he does. His price has even come down too. So I understand the the concern, but with all those things considered, he is interesting to me. Other than that, though, I'm not really looking at the Bucks here. Dame at 8.8 is fine, and like you said, Bobby, is fine, but just not going to be priorities for me. On the other side are the Hornets, of course. Miles Bridges up top, pushing for 40 fantasy points. But obviously he's not going to be owned. His price has actually come way down to 8.2K, so I think he's a lot more viable than he normally is. How are you feeling about Miles and the rest of the Hornets?
Not really getting there. I think Brandon Miller is a bit of a better value at 6.5. He's also come down. He was kind of low to mid 7s a couple weeks ago. I don't think he's a bad option, but they do have a pretty full rotation these days, post trades. Trey Mann is the one I'm getting to the most, around 18%. So a decent amount for 5.4. Starting role for him, he's been decent since he got here. Don't mind that. Maybe a dusting of Cody Martin and Nick Richards, but it's an ugly team. They have a really low total. They're big underdogs. Don't want to go too overweight on Charlotte.
Yeah, I agree. If you want to just assume this game stays close, Bridges and Miller, their prices are nice at this point, but nobody looks really good here. Nobody pops. I think the only guy that would actually feel reasonably good about is Trey Mann. His price is still good. He actually played 33 minutes despite the game blowing out for them last time. So apparently they don't mind running him into the ground no matter what the score is. That's pretty comforting. What's this guy's name? Michik? Remember we talked about it last week?
I remember.
He had 5 fantasy points. 5.
Yeah,
so
I will not be doing that.
He apparently is not blowout proof. So I don't really want to go back to that. But obviously at 4.1K, I guess technically he's in play. But it's mostly Trey Mann for me. All right, next game looks a little bit more palatable, but at the same time, maybe not. Magic hosts the Jazz. The Magic hosts the Jazz. Orlando is a 6.5-point favorite. Banchero is still questionable. He's considered a game time decision. He's been missing lately. And Walker Kessler is questionable for Utah. So those are definitely injuries to monitor. Let me check if Orlando. Jonathan Isaac remains out for Orlando, so there's that as well. The Jazz don't play defense. The Jazz do push the pace, so that has elevated this total to 225, which is not that bad and honestly pretty good relative to this slate. But Orlando is like the exact antithesis of who the Jazz are. They defend very well and they play slower. And obviously, if Banchero is out, they are probably a little bit more likely to be into that even more. So, anyways, starting with the Jazz, who stands out?
Yeah, I think Markkanen is the one that stands out the most for 77. I think he's a pretty good upper mid-range spend. He's come down over the last couple of weeks or so. Bad spot, of course, but I think we're getting him cheap enough now where I have a lot of interest. John Collins maybe starting at center doesn't look bad, but I'm not going to be too invested in really anyone else here. I think Markkanen's the one I'll have the most of, but even that is probably topping out at around 10 to 15%.
Yeah, Markkanen is totally fine. Just like usual with the Jazz guys, they're all totally fine. I think the one guy that I actually would prioritize if I'm feeling good about playing anybody against the Magic would actually be Keontae George, just because at 5'7", he still remains too cheap for a guy who's playing 30-plus minutes every night and starting. So Keontae looks pretty good. I will say Taylor Hendricks at 4.4. That's a pretty good price for a guy who's starting and getting 26 to 29 minutes. And if Walker Kessler's out, maybe he gets that role solidified a little bit more and we can feel even better about him. Across the board, it's not a good spot. It's on the road, and it's against a slow defensive team. But, yeah, I think I'm looking at Keontae and I'm looking at Hendricks for the most part. But I do think the Jazz are viable if this game stays close. On the other side, this matchup obviously benefits the Magic the most. Banchero leads the way with a 41-point projection. And it's a great spot for basically all Orlando guys here. But are there any Magic guys that you actually feel good about?
Yeah, I think Wagner for 7.6 is good either way. Banchero's questionable, of course, again, with an illness he's been dealing with the last few games. So he would look better if Paolo sits out. Caleb Houston, I guess, saw plenty of playing time the other night. He was only 3.6, not a good per minute guy, but cheap enough and a good enough matchup to where I think you can give him a look. Markelle Fultz is only 4K. Minutes are low. He's always hurt. He's always at risk of getting hurt again. But for 4K, I don't think that's the worst kind of buy low and hope for the best option, even if he plays like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I love Fultz regardless, just because he's super cheap and he did play 25 minutes in his last game. It's just a smash spot. And if you can get cheap guys like this, he's not even carrying ownership yet. Maybe it's just because people aren't sure about his role or his minutes or whatever, but I really like Fultz at this price. Franz is a really good play if Banchero's out. I'm not going to go there if he's in. I do think you can play Wendell Carter, you can play Suggs, you can play Cole. I just don't feel amazing about any of those guys.
Carter's the other one that kind of semi stands out, but yeah, I agree. I don't want to go too overboard on this team either, even though it is a good spot and their total's higher than usual. Right.
Now, if Banchero is out, I would feel a lot better about Wendell Carter Jr. But and he's just okay. He's fine if Banchero is in. It's just Orlando. You never feel really good about them because the usage really goes through Banchero and Franz. But Banchero being out would open that up considerably. Moving on here, Hawks and Nets in Brooklyn. The Nets are 1-point home favorites with a 222 total. So it's really not that bad of a game environment, especially if the Hawks end up dictating pace. Trae Young is out basically for the season, it seems. And Okongwu is also out. So there's lots of usage to go around here. DeJounte Murray is the top guy for the Hawks, but his price is elevated all the way up to 9.4K. Are you feeling good about paying that much for DeJounte at this point? And are there any of the Hawks that stand out for you?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be doing that. I don't think it's like egregious, but I don't really see the need to do that. I think Jalen Johnson is always interesting. Kind of as another spend, secondary spend shouldn't be that popular either because he never seems to be. He's 81. I don't think that's too much to pay for him. I think the one I have the most interest is Capella. Saw him get up to 25 minutes the other night. That was a blowout, so perhaps there was a little room for more. Don't think he's a bad option. He's only 5'3", so kind of buying low there. Not a bad matchup against Brooklyn here. Bogdanovich is always in play, even though he never really goes off in the starting role where he's kind of splitting the usage with Johnson and Murray, but it's only 6'4". Minutes should be there for he and Bay. I think they're both decent mid-range guys, but yeah, Capella is probably the one I have the most interest in.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if the minutes are going to be there. Obviously, he had been limited, and that's just always a bit of a question with Capella. If there's any doubt there, I mean, Bruno Fernando at 3.6K as the direct backup with Okongwu out is somewhat interesting, but if the minutes are going to be there, I don't know if I'd do that. I do like the Jalen Johnson call. We talked about him when he was 7.9K in his last slate, and he smashed, and we really liked him then. No reason to not like him here. DeJounte is probably too expensive for me at this point. He's a totally fine play. You can go there. He just does not stand out at this price point anymore, especially when there are a lot of good point guards and just a lot of spends that you can go with on this slate. I still like Boggy a lot at 6.4K. Nothing wrong with him. Yes, I agree. The ceiling does not always get met, but he's too cheap for the role he now has, so I do like him. That's going to do it for me for the Hawks, I think. Over on the other side are the Nets. Cam Thomas remains out. Ben Simmons was in, but he's questionable now, which probably means he's not going to play, which is great because that opens up value for Dennis Schroeder, and usage as a whole is going to be spread out with these Nets guys. So Mikal Bridges starts us off here with his price coming all the way down to 7K flat now. He's got the best projection for the Nets, and he is looking to be chalky on this slate. So how are you feeling about – and Cam Johnson also is looking to be chalk. So if Ben Simmons is out, then you add Schroeder to the mix. We're looking at chalk Nets. How are you feeling about that?
Not good, but it is a good spot. Atlanta really awful defensively, play at a really fast pace. So I get it, even if it is uncomfortable. Bridges is the one I have the most of, along with Cam Johnson, kind of like the field. I have a lot of Lonnie Walker right now. Don't love that. He's 3.9, but if Simmons is out, perhaps he can get 25 minutes off the bench. Schroeder, another guy that's popping into about a quarter of the lineups I have right now. Nick Claxton also looks pretty popular, but he's only 6'4". He was, over 7K for most of the last couple of months. So this is another guy whose salaries are dipping. So I get it. And certainly the matchup for him looks pretty good too. So yeah, it's not the best thing in the world. I wish it wasn't true, but the Nets look pretty good tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the matchup, there's no reason not to like them. I mean, if you look at in a vacuum, do we like to play the Nets? No, not really. But there is usage being opened up here with Ben Simmons and Cam Thomas not playing. I mean, if Ben Simmons is out, that's a lot of usage and a lot of cheap, usable guys here. I mean, I'm giving the green light to Bridges, Claxton, Cam Johnson, Schroeder, and as much as I hate it, I am okay with Lonnie Walker at 3.9K. I would play the ownership game a little bit here. If Lonnie Walker is going to be mega chalk or something, then I'm gladly getting off of Lonnie Walker just because he's so volatile. But I mean, he can be an explosive scorer. So if Simmons is going to be out, he should get 20 to 25 minutes off the bench, and he absolutely can smash in this spot. So I don't have a problem with it at all. Next game, we got Warriors and Knicks in the Madison Square Garden. The Knicks are 4.5-point home dogs, which does suggest possibly that Jalen Brunson could remain out. He is questionable. And I think that's it. The usual suspects, Julius Randle and OG Anunoby, are both out still. On the Warriors side, Andrew Wiggins is out and everybody else is in. So starting with the Warriors, who do you like?
I'm not really getting to any of them, which is a little scary. I do think Curry I might give a boost just to kind of get him into a few more lineups. He's not going to be owned at all, but I'd be happy to get like 5% of him just to have a little exposure. I think it's a decent spot. The Knicks are certainly not the defensive stalwart they usually are with guys like Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson out. So Curry looks fine. Thompson off the bench. He's still cheap enough, 5'6". Wiggins being out, I think, gives him a little more minutes upside. Moses Moody's 3,800 now. He was 3K flat the other night. I don't really want to pay 38 for him. That's a very shaky role he's got with Chris Paul back. So plenty of minutes they can kind of divide up between these guys. I think Draymond and Kuminga are okay. They've both come down again into the 6K range, but Yeah, I'm not getting to really a whole lot here.
Yeah, it's going to be the same thing for me. I think a lot of these guys are just fine. Podziemski, Clay, Kuminga, Dre, they're just all kind of the same play today. So I would just go with who projects the best. And right now, that's Draymond Green, and he's not even coming in at ownership. So I like Draymond just fine at 6.2.
Draymond.
Dre, whatever. And I know Curry is always interesting. He has not been hitting his shots. He's not been producing at all over his last 5 games. So pretty hesitant to make him a priority at that price. But unowned Chef Curry is always viable. On the other side are the Knicks. Obviously, Jalen Brunson possibly being out again would open up usage considerably. And basically, anybody who starts for the Knicks, it gets the green light because they all get 35-plus minutes. Miles McBride, we liked last time we talked about him. He started, and I believe he played 40 minutes. Let me double-check that. Yep, 40 minutes. So basically, if whoever starts for the Knicks, you can absolutely play them. And right now, if Brunson is out, all the guys are way too cheap. So I'm liking Hart, DiVincenzo, Achua, and McBride here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, more so if Brunson's out, like you said. If he's in, the only guy that I'm looking at really is Hart, but he's come up 7-1, so it's not like we're getting a discount there. He's just going to play a ton. Matchup, I guess, is pretty decent for him. McBride, even at 5K, is still playable. Like you said, 40 minutes we can reasonably expect. So fine with that. He's been decent per minute, starting with Brunson out a couple times in recent weeks. So that's okay. DiVincenzo, Achua are guys I might get to more if Brunson sits. I think Brunson's okay if he's in. I would assume he would just play full minutes. He only missed 1 game with a neck thing. So it's not like it's a lower body injury. He's 9'6". I think that's fine. Kind of as a, he and Curry are not going to be popular. So both of them as kind of pay up to be contrarian plays, I think are viable.
Yeah, and to be clear, I really only have crazy interest in these Knicks guys if Brunson is out. If Brunson's in, I think they're all just okay because they're going to get those minutes. But yeah, I mean, Brunson would be the play for New York if he's in. But if he's out, I like them all quite a bit. All right, next game we got OKC and San Antonio. The game is in San Antonio. The Spurs are 11-point home dogs. This game does have a really nice 238 total, so if it does stay close, it could be really fun. The last time Wemby and Chet faced off, we had some fireworks. They were just going back and forth. So there could be that whole rookie of the year kind of battle here. But the only question is, can it stay close? And how do you feel about paying up for someone like SGA?
He looks good. He always does. I wouldn't say he's too pricey at 10-7. Looks like Jalen Williams is going to be pretty popular again. 7,200 power forward only. I get it. I might just come in under that just naturally. I see why he's pulling ownership, though. It's a good spot for he and Chet also in the 7K range. Actually, Chet's 7,900 now, so he's come up quite a bit over the last couple of days. Yeah, I'm getting to around 20% SGA as my highest owned OKC piece so far. Fine with that. I don't think Josh Giddey's a bad lower owned play, kind of in the mid range. The minutes for him are always shaky, but still a good per minute guy when he's out there. He's only 5,400. Not going to be popular, so I don't mind him kind of as a leverage cheapie away from J-Dub if he's going to be 6 times his owned.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same story goes with Chet. I mean, he's 700 more than Jalen and about half the ownership right now, and he projects better. So Chet's very interesting to me. He's been kind of meh across 2 meetings with the Spurs, but he's turning on as of late with 41-plus fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. So if we're catching Chet on a heater against the Spurs, that is interesting to me. So I like him quite a bit at 7.9. For the most part, it's just the big 3 for OKC for me. It's going to be SGA, who looks awesome. He's averaging 58 fantasy points per game across his 2 meetings with San Antonio this year. And they rank dead last against point guards. So, I mean, he looks amazing. It comes down to, are you going to play him, or are you going to play Giannis, or are you going to go play the Suns guys if Beal is out or whatever? But he looks great. So yeah, it's a big 3 for me for the most part. On the other side are the Spurs. Obviously, Wemby leads the way. He has a nice 52-point projection and a really, really nice 32% boom rating at DFS Hero. His price is up a little bit to 10.1K, but as we've been saying all year, that's where it should be. And it finally is there. He's averaging 42 fantasy points per game against OKC in 2 meetings, but I don't really care about that because we know what he can do. So how are you feeling about Wemby, and are there any other Spurs that you like?
There are quite a few, which is a little alarming. Wemby, obviously the headliner. Love to get to him as much as I can. Trey Jones and Devin Vassell, I'm getting to kind of around even with the field. One guy that looks like a really good play is Keldon Johnson. He's kind of had a wide range of outcomes, like some bad shooting games of late, but 34 minutes off the bench in the last game after, I think, getting hurt on Sunday. He's 4.9 now, which is wildly cheap. We were paying upwards of 7K for him a couple of months ago off the bench, so 4.9 just looks like a mispricing. Not entirely sure what that's based on, but I'm very happy to be over the field on Keldon. I think he's just way too cheap.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think the Spurs guys offer decent value, especially if you're not super into the Nets value. Those are some interesting pivots. And I mean, Keldon Johnson is carrying 27% ownership here, and it's probably going to be more than that. So that is perhaps cause for pause and maybe a reason to fade him. But I totally understand where you're going there. For the most part, for me, it'd just be Wemby or bust when it comes to the Spurs. All right, last game of the night, we have the Rockets in Phoenix taking on the Suns. The Suns are 8.5-point favorites. We do have some injury news to monitor for both sides. Jalen Green is questionable for this game, and Tari Eason remains out for the Rockets. For the Suns, Bradley Beal is questionable. Eric Gordon is also questionable, and Yusuf Nurkic is back. He's probable to play. So, starting on the Houston side, who stands out?
Yeah, naturally Van Vliet for 6.6. He keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. He hasn't been particularly good lately, but I'm happy to pay down for him. That's another guy we've been paying more for all season, like upwards of 8.5K. So 66 looks like a little bit of an underpay on him. I will be, looks like over the field so far. Dylan Brooks, another value I'm getting quite a bit of for 4.4, 32-minute projection. Should be fine either way. More usage will flow his way if Jalen Green is out. If Jalen is out, we'll also see Jabari, Cam Whitmore, and Amen Thompson, in theory, get more usage, more minutes in particular for Thompson and Whitmore. Both would look like good values in that scenario. Thompson is priced up, but if he starts, I think he's still in play. As far as Green himself, he's gotten cheaper too, but there's a reason for that. He is bad, so not really going to do that.
Yeah.
And Şengün for 8.6, I guess it's fine. He's also kind of tailed off over the last month or so, but we know the upside's there, and in theory, he'll see the ball more if Jalen is out.
Yeah. I might be a little bit underweight on FVV just because he has not really been producing, and he's going to be really chalky, but I totally understand it's a really nice price. Jabari Smith has actually been wrecking quietly over the last 3 games. His price has come up, but it's not that bad of a matchup, and he projects decently. So right now he's not carrying much ownership. If that stays there, that might be a little bit of an interesting pivot off of FVV because it's about the same price. I love Amen Thompson if Jalen Green is out. And then that would give me even more reason to get off of FVV. One guy I do like for value possibly would be Cam Whitmore. He actually is carrying a little bit of ownership, 10%. But if Jalen Green is out, he just would have a little extra usage off the bench. So I don't mind him at all. All right, for the Suns, this is actually pretty big. Obviously, if Beal and Eric Gordon are out, that's a lot of usage opening up for the Suns. It would make KD and Devin Booker look really, really good up top. They're always playable anyways. But how are you feeling about those guys and anybody else for Phoenix?
Yeah, I'm getting to kind of an even amount of KD and Booker with Beal projected in. I will certainly get more if he's out. Kind of as usual, Royce O'Neal would be an okay value. Eric Gordon would be an okay value if he's out too. The guy I'm getting to most here is Nurkic for 6,600. He's not like cheap, but decent enough spot, and it's a short enough slate with center not being super loaded. I don't mind looking his way.
Yeah, worth noting, Bull is actually playing quite a bit. Let's see here. His minutes over the last 2 games, 27, 24 minutes. So it looks like they're giving him the opportunity to prove that game against Houston wasn't a fluke. So that's a little bit troubling for Nurkic's upside, I think. Although he did play 37 minutes last game, so maybe I'm just wrong about that one. I will say it is interesting that KD projects better than Booker, but he is coming in at a fraction of the ownership at the moment. I don't know if that's going to stick, especially if Beal and Gordon end up sitting. But I do think that most people will flock to Booker first because, number one, he's cheaper, and also he plays, the guard positions, whereas the two main guys coming out are, in fact, guards. So, but if KD is actually going to be that unowned compared to Booker, he's very, very appealing to me. One other guy we'll note, or two other guys, Royce O'Neal, we don't like it, but if Beal and Eric Gordon are both out, he could have some minutes. He's only 4.8K. And then Grayson Allen, his price has come up, but he has been playing pretty well for Phoenix, and his role would be expanded, a little extra usage if Beal and Gordon are also out. All right, before we wrap things up here, let's look at the entire field where ownership is flocking right now. The chalkiest play is Cam Johnson, which makes sense. He's cheap and he's facing the Hawks, and some Nets guys are missing. So based off of what you're seeing here as far as chalk goes, what chalk are you fading?
Jalen Williams, I think. Just like he's fine. It's a good matchup and all that, but there's enough else in that range that I think you don't really have to go over the field on a already popular Jalen Williams.
Yep, I'm with you there. I prefer Chet as a leverage play there, assuming ownership sticks. If ownership keeps as it is, I am fine with leveraging KD over Booker and letting other people eat the Devin chalk, and hopefully he doesn't, go off. And then I already said I'd be a little bit underweight on an FVP. If you're doing a single entry, I don't know if I'd exactly fade him because that's a really good price, especially if Jalen Green is out. If Jalen Green is in, I would double down there and probably, get away from him more than the field is. Let's look at the boom rating at DFS Hero. Wemby leads the way with a 32% boom rating. Is there anybody here that you see with a nice boom rating that you can confidently say you are building most of your lineups around?
As of now, it's Cam Johnson just because he's 4'9" and facing Atlanta. Like, that's just pretty good chalk, I think. Both Johnsons, Cam and Keldon, both 4'9", both look like core plays as of now.
Okay, yeah, I came into the slate thinking this could be another Giannis night, and I still think it could be. He's got the best projection of the entire slate. In theory, he's got a really good matchup, and he's not pulling enough ownership for what he can do. Just based on ceiling and ownership, I think I'm going to start, unless something drastically changes going into lock, I'm going to start my builds with Giannis. And then Wemby is actually a pretty close second just because he's got the best boom rating of the slate. He's got the second best projection of the slate, and he also is not that owned. I look at somebody like SGA. He's right up there with Wemby and Giannis, but he's pulling 22% ownership, whereas Wemby's at like 15. So all three of those guys are worth building around, but I would probably go in that order as things stand. All right, that does it for our game-by-game breakdown for this slate. Hopefully we helped you out. If we do, please give this video a like. And also, please consider subscribing to help the channel and let us know that we're doing the right thing, and also help you get alerted to future videos just like this. Thanks for watching, and good luck.